I managed to arrive in Hong Kong and I was welcomed in a fantastic way. The first thing I noticed is that when you're abroad, you feel like between expats, there is this bond that happens because we all want to support each other. We flew away, we left our families, our friends, we left everything that we had behind, and we end up in Asia, which is kind of an unknown territory for me, was at the time. And as much as I enjoyed everything that I landed in, the effect of extra bonding was fantastic.
Welcome to another episode of Yana TV. Today our guest is Omar Hadoui, who is a Managing Director APAC of BI Worldwide. Omar, thank you so much for being with us in the studio today. With your 20 years of experience working in different companies in Asia specifically, so that our audience understands, can you just give us a bit of a background? First of all, where were you born? Maybe let's start with this.
Sure. So I'm French native, and my parents migrated from Morocco in the early 70s. So, Morocco, yeah. And I grew up in the south of France. A beautiful area near Aix-en-Provence, Avignon. And later on, I started growing into my career and I moved into different regions of the world. The first one was really kind of crossing the channel from France to England. I spent 7 years in England.
And when did you come to Asia?
And I came to Asia, it was around 2000, end of 2009, beginning 2010. And the reason why was because I had spent 7 years in the UK, and I think the weather was starting to get into me. So I needed to go somewhere else and find some sun. And also I needed to expand my exposure to the world, to the global world. So I decided on Asia because I felt like there was a stronger calling than it would have been with Latin America, for example. So I felt like, okay, Asia, it would be for the future.
So it was like an adventure.
It was an adventure, yes.
And I know you're also into adventurous sports. There's a lot of those things you can do in Asia.
Absolutely. So I did, motorbikes, skydiving, scuba diving, free diving, which is apnea, basically, which really pushes your limits in terms of personal abilities. I love all that.
So you could say you're free dived. Into which country in Asia first?
So from Europe, I free dived into Hong Kong. So that was my gateway to Asia. So 2 years in Hong Kong was with in a role where I was managing 6 people and I was a regional manager.
And how was the experience? I mean, here you are half French, half Moroccan, coming to Hong Kong. First time, right, working in Asia.
Well, I managed to arrive in Hong Kong and I was welcomed in a fantastic way. The first thing I noticed is that when you're abroad, you feel like between expats, there is this bond that happens because we all want to support each other. We flew away, we left our families, our friends, we left everything that we had behind, and we end up in Asia, which is kind of an unknown territory for me, was at the time. And as much as I enjoyed everything that I landed in, the effect of extra bonding was fantastic.
So people, right?
So people
from all over the world, probably.
Absolutely.
I mean, Hong Kong is very international.
Very international. And the vibe was buzzing. It's a much more fast-paced environment, as you would expect, than the south of France. It's a slower pace. We enjoy it. It's more on the quality life. Here, it was like a professional journey of just going faster and more crazy and learning faster and doing more and more.
Any interesting stories?
Yeah, well, my first day actually in Hong Kong, I landed. It was 7 a.m. and my colleagues had already invited me to join them into a gathering, and I had no real clue of what this gathering would be. And we ended up on a boat going for the whole day with a lot of food, a lot of music, a lot of fantastic people around just welcoming me and having a good time, and everyone telling me their stories of Asia. And I was like overwhelmed with how unbelievable this was. And I was like, why didn't I do that earlier?
Wow, that sounds very much like an expat welcome.
It was.
Okay, Hong Kong. And then you moved to?
So then from Hong Kong, the competition poached me from the job I was in and offered me, the reason why I joined them is because they were offering me a regional director role.
Okay.
So I was
level up in the career development.
Exactly. And I ended up with a coverage where I had reports in different countries, Singapore, China.
Right.
So I lived in China. So I went to Singapore and I spent 2 years there. And I had a conversation with my boss and I said, listen, we have enough leadership here in Asia, in Singapore. How about I go to China and I try to develop the business even further there? And so he said yes. And here I am spending 3.5 years in China, completely different experience, a lot going on there.
Where did you stay? In which city?
I stayed in Shanghai.
Okay, Shanghai.
Yeah, it's very much more difficult than Hong Kong and Singapore because of the language.
Yeah.
So I think in the 3.5 years that I lived there, I probably had 2 taxi drivers speaking English. I think something that I quickly learned is that when they speak in Chinese, because I didn't, there's a lot of modern words that don't exist in Chinese, in Mandarin. So basically they translate automatically to English. So you have all those sentences in Chinese, and suddenly you have all those modern words like digital and things like that pop in. So you can kind of reconstruct a little bit
what the conversation is
about. So that was helpful because I could spend like an hour in a meeting with clients in Mandarin and still see if my team was on track with how we were presenting and all that. One trick
this is a trick. This is a good trick. How was life?
Life was amazing. Yes, amazing. Everywhere I went, there was learnings. One question that I've always been asked is, which one did you prefer, Hong Kong, Singapore, or Shanghai?
Yeah.
I have no answer to that. They all brought me something memorable, formidable, and grew me in different directions and different ways. Someone in Shanghai asked me one day, how would you describe Shanghai if it was a friend? It would be my dysfunctional friend. And because Shanghai keeps you on your toes, there's always something going on. You have to be a troubleshooter. You have to be on the go. This is why Shanghai and China are what they are. People are very dynamic, buzzy, always looking entrepreneurial. They're always looking for something new and finding solutions to everything. So that kind of taught me or helped me build even stronger edges to how I was in my ways.
But of course, now I want to know, is there any interesting story happened in Shanghai that you would like to share?
Yeah.
Something that maybe, again, for you was unusual, unexpected, culturally perhaps very different?
Many. I don't know. I'll take one I'll take one related to work.
Okay.
I had a team reporting to me, 10 people, and one of them, the director, senior director, had just given birth, and she was coming back to the office. And she came to me and asking me for a breastfeeding holiday. And I'm like, what? I'm an expat from Europe. We don't have that. It's a HR policy or actually a governmental policy. So I had to go to HR and ask for more directions on that. And you do have to ask where do they do it, because they can go home and do it. Anyway, that's one story that stuck with me.
That's funny. Okay, so China, and then after that you came back to Singapore. So
then I came back here. It was 2017-ish. And I was like, okay, time to, and also there was no further evolution possible for me in the organization I was with. So it was time to rethink a little bit. So I decided it was time to come back to Singapore. And a few months later, I found a new role in Singapore with a consulting firm. And 2 years later, I was hired by BI Worldwide as a business development director for Asia Pacific before I got promoted a year and a half later to managing director.
Congratulations.
Thank you. That was fantastic, fantastic journey.
BI stands for?
Business Incentives Worldwide.
Okay.
Yeah.
It is largely, we could say, about employees' engagement, or like in other words, employee experience. Would it be correct?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the reasons why I joined BI Worldwide was the fact that they are all about experiences. They're a company that focuses on how do we inspire people, whether they're employees, channel partners, salespeople, regardless of the role. And so the fact that they're all about experiences means that it's very kind of like driven towards human behaviors and all that. And I love that.
And you come across very much as a people person. So I can imagine that for you, it's like a really good fit.
Absolutely.
So it has been now, what, 4.5 years, right?
4 years, yes.
So in those 4 years that you were here, so what was your biggest lesson as the person who is leading?
Yeah, I think, so I joined BI Worldwide on the 1st March of 2020. So my first lesson with BI Worldwide was we're on lockdown, and I just started with them. So everything I had to do had to be at home by myself. So I learned a lot about how to work in a very kind of virtual world with BI Worldwide, and how we can still make it happen. It was no one felt like restrained and constrained. The virtual world started. We had even more engagement because we were creating all those like virtual ways to connect, those games, assignments, employee experience kind of mechanisms and ways to stay closer.
In reality, very interesting. I'm just curious, as I'm listening to you, and again, just with all those years, and you shared you have been like to so many countries and places and worked in different companies. Okay, now you're managing director, but before that, you still had a lot of bosses, and probably you still have in some way, right? Yes. So that helped you to become who you are today. And usually what we ask people, who was your favorite boss and why, the most inspirational person? With you, I'm going to go in the other direction. So please forgive me for that. So who was the most challenging, really difficult boss and why?
Okay, I'll tell the story. So the story is basically, as I was trying to leave the UK and Europe because I wanted an experience abroad, I found out that there was a role available, and it meant reporting to a certain person, an individual. I did my research, and I found out that some of my network or contact or friends had worked with her. So I quickly gathered that basically they said, Omar, just don't go to the interview. It is not worth it. It's going to be a nightmare reporting to that individual. And I decided, is the prize worth going through the struggle? And so the struggle was basically, that struggle would lead me to Hong Kong, which would be my gateway to Asia. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to take the risk. And indeed, that was the worst boss I could have expected. It was very dictatorial. It was there was no space for creativity as a team. It was mostly directions given to a whole team, and it was a leadership by fear. And I tried to shake a few things, and it created a lot of clashes. I could not handle my relationship with my direct boss. So I directed my attention and my energy to the customer, and the customer appreciated everything, and I had a great relationship with the customer. So everything was in a good place on that side, meaning that my company was benefiting from the work that I was doing. So it kind of actually started mitigating that conflict that I had with my boss, because the outcome of my work with the customer was going well.
Actually, it's interesting because it's very common. I think people often complain that they don't like their bosses. I mean, even though now it's all about leadership and you have to be a good leader, you have to give space to people, empathetic, listen, give space for creativity. It's all about this right now. But there are still plenty of bosses that people don't like. So you can't change the boss.
Right.
So you have to,
absolutely.
So you have to adjust, and you did.
Yeah,
And it was beautiful. So to focus on the customer was still, from your perspective, it benefited your work and your career greatly, which to me, it is just like one of those examples, all the mind shift.
Absolutely.
So great example.
Somehow it's also, this is where it's probably the time to ask ourselves how we can become the leaders to others. And I was going towards a role where I wanted to be a leader. So I was like, how can I impact positively the rest of the team? So I was creating bonds with the rest of the team as well. And we stayed in touch, but yeah, it was really about focusing the energy in the right place.
Okay, maybe risk management, not your thing, but your positive attitude brings you forward in life.
Sure.
I mean, this is the most amazing part.
Absolutely.
And also, it's just interesting how with different people and bosses, we just learn, some people teach us like really things that we need, to learn in terms of how we need to be, and other people teach us how not to be.
Absolutely.
Right. So you guys are focusing, what you said, on the customer and employee engagement. And I did some research. So I know that you have what is called a 12 steps of employee engagement.
Right.
So we're not going to go through all 12 steps today on camera, but maybe you can tell us your 3 favorite and why.
Sure. So the 12 new rules of engagement are extracted from many years of research that BI Worldwide has carried across the world. And what it is about is gathering what are the meaningful rules of engagement that really impact employees to create an employee experience. The 3 that I prefer the most are make it personal. It doesn't mean that you have to have all your employees coming at home and have dinner with them. And it's more about how do you engage with them and how do you get your managers, because they're the first port of call with the employees, to understand better the different employees and the different personalities. So make it personal. The other one I like is magnify their success. It's really about how you quickly spot who is doing something that is going to benefit the company, or they're creating a success stories in a way, or they have over-delivered somewhere. And basically, it's helping them build their internal brand with everyone, and external brand if it also happens outside. It could be a post on LinkedIn about what they did, but it's about magnifying their success. And then the last one I could mention probably is show them a path. It's about showing them that there is a path in the organizations for them.
For the development.
For the development, yes. There is a purpose. They need to feel like there is a journey here. And sometimes it's very simple. It's very hard for organizations to create a career path for everyone. And not everyone wants a career path, by the way. So we just try to help people understand that if they get to a certain point, there are milestones to get to something bigger. And so those 3 kind of create a really good sense of my favorite ones. And also I like them because they're not just, they are shared responsibility between the organization and the managers.
I like that. And we're going to include in the description of this interview the link to all 12 steps, the rules, right?
Rules, 12 new rules, yes.
So that you can just look up yourself. I mean, for the remaining 9, I think it's really interesting, guys, what you're doing.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask tough questions.
All right.
I'm curious, within the company, and you don't have to name the company, right? But have you had experience working, you as a leader, working with people who were really difficult employees? Sometimes it's a personality clash and it doesn't work maybe in a team or with someone else, but like something which is not, quite aligned. And so how did you solve that?
I think I would say that there was a time where an employee would kind of isolate themselves. So as opposed to, it could be someone toxic or something, and that's a little bit strange and odd. And I'm very cautious about that because it makes me realize I need to be careful as to how I go with this. It could be personal. And as a manager, I do not have the right to go into the lives of my employees without any limits. So I had a conversation with 2 other people who were closer to that individual. And slowly we found out what was in there without being kind of like, without praying, but more understanding how can we rebalance that, because we don't want that person to exclude themselves fully. And we used or did a few things that helped. It was actually back to what I was saying, magnifying their success, where something that they had done had been noticed. And so we magnified their success. And suddenly, I don't know if it helped counter their personal intention to isolate themselves, but they came back. So that helped. Those small celebrations of that person as a team, not just saying, you're doing great, but as a team, you are doing, those 3 people here are doing great. And she was part of them. And slowly she came back into the organizational culture and belonging, and had that sense of belonging again.
That's a beautiful story. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Now that we're in Singapore and you've been living here for a while and working for a while, What is your favorite thing about Singapore?
I love the fact that it's got that, it's considered a regional hub, and I think it's really living the regional hub status that it has. I always say that when you go to any country around Asia, you do not have a more Asian multicultural city-state than Singapore. A lot of Vietnamese, Indonesian, Chinese, from Hong Kong, from all around Asia, you can recognize the different cultures here in Singapore. So that's something that I think is rich. Maybe an analogy, my favorite street in Singapore, one of my favorite streets is Telok Ayer Street. Mm-hmm. And I love it because there's like, first there's like a church, there's a mosque, there's a temple, and then next to it there's like bars and restaurants, and there's like Indonesian food, and everyone is at peace there. That's that cultural mix, and the fact that it's all happening in a happy place.
That's what you like. What is your least favorite thing about Singapore, if there is anything?
Well, I don't know. I'm hoping that I could become even further part of Singapore, and sometimes
in what way? Like in what way?
So I'm on an employment pass, for example. Mm-hmm. I would love to be part of Singapore as a PR and all that. So I find
there's no shame in saying it. You're like, yes, you want to be.
No, I would love to. I would love to. It is. I think all those administration steps are very complicated, and there's still a bit of a gray area for me. But that's my aspirations. Yeah, I'm here for the long haul, which also is part of the 12 new rules of engagement, the long haul. So I'm feeling like I'm part of it, and I'm here for the long haul.
Final question, I promise, okay? So let's say we go all the way when you are 300 years old. Mm-hmm. And you look back at you sitting here today in the studio, and we are having this recording and this interview, and you're at this particular stage in your life. So that person who is 300 years old, what do you think he would say to you today?
I think he would say, embrace the change and the chaos, because I feel like one doesn't come without the other. And every time I changed something in my life, throughout those travels that I've had, and from moving from France to the UK, to Amsterdam, Hong Kong, so there was always a little bit of chaos in making it happen. But embrace the change and embrace the chaos, and everything will go well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that was Omar Hadoui on Yana TV. I love it. Embrace the change, embrace the chaos. And Omar and I would love to hear from you in the comments. So please let us know, are there any other French Moroccans, or just French, or just Moroccans in our audience? I mean, we would love to connect, and please absolutely check, Omar's LinkedIn profile. And we are so grateful to Muse Studio for hosting Yana TV. So thank you for having us here. And probably the most important, remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel and share this episode with friends. Everything, especially the change, starts with the conversation. See you next time. I think you're the first Moroccan guest of the show.
Fantastic.
I should give you a present or a medal or something.
I'm going to make a wish. It's the first time then.